Since it's the holiday of Yom Tov of Sukkot, I want to discuss a question. Everybody knows that we as Lubavitchers say Calabria Sregim. Sregim is grew in Calabria. Question is, if I go now and I take an esrog which grew in Eretz Yisrael and I plant it in Calabria. Like Kfar Chabad has a sregim which are Zan Chazanish and has a sregim which are from the Rebbe's esrog. Take any of those sregim and plant them in Calabria, do they become Calabria sregim? The Shaila, is it has to do with the land or it has to do with the esrog, or what does it have to do with? That's what we're going to discuss today and see if an esrog has to do, the mile of a Calabria esrog has to do with the place where it grows, and if something goes through another country in between, does it still retain the mile of Calabria? Or if it goes from Eretz Yisrael, does it still retain the milus, and does it absorb any milus or chesremus from wherever it's growing? Well, first we'll start with introduction. What is the milus of a Calabria? Take Calabria Sregim. So there's two reasons that are given by the Rebbe. One reason is because it says Mishmani Haaretz, Mashmani Haaretz Yeh Moshevecha, and the Medrash says Mashmani Haaretz Zu Italia Shel Yavan. We want to get the esrog from Mashmani Haaretz, so that's the reason why we take an Italian esrog. The second reason is because Italian esrogim, Calabria esrogim, are muchzakim as bilti murkav. That means that they have a cheskas kashrus, that they have not been grafted and have not been manipulated in any way to make the esrog possible. We've done the discussion of what is a murkav and what is not a murkav, and if it applies or doesn't apply, there's not going to be enough time to my I'm not going to get into it. I wasn't planning on getting into it. I'm going to, let's put that question aside for a minute and just discuss the milus of Calabria and how things worked from Calabria going weiter. But first, I want to discuss some things that don't seem directly connected to the question we're discussing. There is a halacha that l'chatchila you should not tovel in the river during Bichlal, definitely not during rainy season, after the rains are melted, because a mikveh has to be bashboiden, has to be rainwater has to be enclosed in a space. And if it's not enclosed in a space, it's zeichel. If it's moving, then it's possible. A masheik in a maya is kosher even bezeichel. There's a question: if you dig a hole next to a river and it fills up with water, what is it? Is that a maya or is that a river? There is a discussion on poskim how far it goes, etc. It's a machzedek has a few places discussed it. There's discussed two of the places. One of the tshuvas that he discusses is here today Kuf Samach Zayin. He says that if you see that the rainwater from the river got absorbed first into the earth, and then from there it's nimshach megidei hamayon, it pulls into the hole through the gidei hamayon, through the veins, so to speak, of the mayon, then it's considered like a mayon. If it comes to the mayon in the way of neviah, of flowing, it becomes mayim chayim. Why? Shenishtanu leiluyay al yidei she'avru derech oivi haaretz v'nasu mayim noivim. You have a bach which says that it's asur. He's referring to when the rainwater did not have enough time to go through the earth and change its status from rainwater to mayim. But if it goes through earth, meshech nochim v'rav, it becomes like a mayim. That's one place to discuss. Another place in Siman Shimon Medvav and Oisir Islam Adal from the base says that when it looks like a mayim, that it's coming up from the bottom of the earth, and it has a siman of a mayim, then it's considered like a mayim. So we have one example of something which enters the earth as one thing and comes out the earth as something else. Now, you also have that when it comes to trees or planting. If you take the Gemara and the Dharma, if you take seeds which are tamei and you planted them and they grow, the tree is not tamei, even though it came from a tamei seed. It's learned from the pasuk, but that's an example of something else. It goes into the earth and it changes its metzias, the earth changes its metzias to become something new that wasn't there before. Right? So now, if you're going to say that, if you're going to use these as examples that are connected to an esrog, then you could say, I took an episodic esrog, I stuck it in Calabria, it doesn't make a difference which esrog I took. It came out, went in as a Chazanish Israeli esrog, and it came out as a Calabria esrog. And that's it, it's good to go. And then you make other people happy also. Or you take another kind of esrog, you stick it into the ground, it comes out, it becomes kosher, it becomes Calabria as it comes out from the earth from the other side. Just like a mayon, changes its status, and just like a tomatic seed changes its status. If the mile of Calabria is that it grows in the land, then that's one thing. So if you want to say that the only mile of Calabria is mashmani aretz, that it is yonik from mashmani aretz, then it's this esrog became a Calabria esrog on the spot. Now, if you're going to say that the Calabria esrog has another element to it, it's not only because it grows mashmani aretz. We say that it has also it has yichus. And what it says that it's muchzak as a bilti murkav. It says in the place in Sfesh Chasam Sefer writes very strongly, esrogim and it's always been like that for all the years. Ashkenazim always took Italian esrogim, so therefore this esrog has yichus. So if the esrog has yichus, and the yichus remains when it's planted elsewhere, but that yichus doesn't get absorbed when it's planted in Italy. So an Italian esrog growing in Eretz Yisrael has the Italian yichus, and a Chazanish esrog growing in Italy doesn't have the Italian yichus. Right? So it doesn't make a difference where it grows. If you look at it from that point of view, the other reason what it is. Now, so it looks so far that we need to we have a mashmani aretz, we need to have it growing in the place, a mashmani aretz. It also has to have a yichus, that it's been there, and also has to be built imurkov. Right? That's the ma'ila, because if you have a yichus, what's the point of the yichus? The yichus is not just that it's miyuchos, it's just miyuchos because we know that it's bilti murkov. In addition to it, there's also an element of simonim in the esrog. How do you determine if the esrog is kosher? If there's a suffix on the esrog, there's certain simonim that are brought in place. Certain simonim are the simonim make the esrog kosher apostle, or the only general simonim. It's also a big discussion. I'm not going to get into it, but that is another element of it. Now, I want to go before I go back to what I wanted to discuss. I want to leave you with this question. I'm going to give you a short historical background of Calabria Esrogim and Deir Shvi. And the reason is because of different letters from the Rebbe. If you look at the letters from the Rebbe, you see what the Rebbe focused on. What was the most important thing? So Calabria Esrogim were always being used by Ashkenazim. And we know that the Rebbeim Dafka wanted Calabria Esrogim. The Rebbe traveled to get a Calabria Esrog. The Rebbe Rashab specifically asked for Calabria Esrog. In America, Calabria Esrogim were always being brought. Came a time in the early Yuds that somebody was ma'oider a shaila on the Calabria Esrogim. What happened? There came Calabria Esrogim to America that looked much nicer than the ones that were there a few years before. They were too nice to be kosher. So the people were starting to have. There was a guy from Switzerland, his name was Mr. Ziegelman, who wrote to the Rebbe a letter that he saw that in Calabria they take esrog trees, they graft them on top of lime trees, and that's why it looks nicer. And the reason for it, just a practical reason, the esrog tree is very weak and prone to diseases, and it dies very fast. And if you want to have a steady flow of esrogim, you take a little esrog tree, branch, and you stick it on top of a lime tree or orange tree or any other citrus, because it's easy to, citrus rides on the citrus, and then you have a much stronger tree, because the lime tree is much stronger, much more resistant to diseases, and then you have a nice beautiful esrog tree growing, but its base is in a lime tree. So this person sent a letter to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is not going to brush him off. The Rebbe wrote a letter to Perlov from Italy in Tafshin Yud Gimel to go check it out. But the Rebbe began by, the Perlov was a Rav in Italy, and then he was a Rav in Australia, very famous Lubavitcher Rav. and some of his relatives are in the room over here. And but the letter to Rav Perlov starts by saying, "Ein daiti noichel imasha oiru esos fekas." I'm not happy that somebody's starting to create problems. But since somebody already started to create problems, you can't just leave it hanging, because the chazaka, yes, it has a chazaka that's kosher. So go find out if the chazaka is still intact or it's no longer intact. And he went and he checked and he saw that there are a lot of fields in Calabria which are doing this form of harkova. So the Rebbe sent Vasil Jacobson, who was dealt with the Sregim already before the Rebbe came to America, to go to Italy and to check the actual trees and tell him, go find the fields where because it's not, he didn't say all the fields. He says it's becoming very common. He told Vasil Jacobson, go look at the fields and see if you could find something which is not murkavim. And how? By checking the trees. So you check the bottom of the tree and you see if the tree is growing on top of a different tree. So if you see an esrog tree is thin, it's growing on top of a thick tree, then you know you have a problem. Or if you see certain cuts in certain places, the people who deal with the sregim know exactly what they're doing about it. And he found places which are good, and from there start taking the sregim. And throughout the years it changed. We're going to get to change that more and more fields became bilti murkav. And then afterwards, other people who were mashgiach. Now, the same thing, past another 2 years, the Rebbe writes that after love and Tavshin Tazvav, that there is a Gerer Chassid in Eretz Yisrael, Nachman Elboy, who came to the Rebbe without tzara. Let's plant Italian Esrogim in Kfar Chabad. And the Rebbe writes that after love, even though the reason that we choose Calabria Esrogim is not only because of Murkavim, the Chashash of Murkav, but also because it has to be Mashmana Yoretz. At least you'll have a half of a mile in Kfar Chabad, so you're not going to be Murkavim. Mashmana Yoretz, you lose out. And he wanted Rav Perlov to check and to decide which trees are good and which trees are not, and choose the right trees to bring to Eretz Yisrael. That was a back and forth with Rav Perlov, that he says that he could find trees which are built on Murkav now, but he has no idea if they used to be Murkavim, if they're descendants of Murkavim trees or not. And he gives a teretz why, a halachic explanation, a good svara why it should still be kosher. He says that once you separate, if you put it on cover and then you separate the Murkav and you plant it elsewhere, so it's no longer Murkav, so maybe it should still work. So the Rebbe tells him, don't rely on it. Go find from the same region, and even better from the same field from which they took all in the past years. And if you're able to find trees which are growing wild in the forest that nobody had any contact, go use those trees. And if not, it is what it is. For love, look, couldn't find wild fields of Esrogim. And so the Rebbe then tells him, go. He says, don't rely on your heter that you're taking a branch from an esrog tree which might have been grafted. Rather, go find trees where the goy is masiach afitumoy, that they're not murkav. Noisaf alamare achitzayni. In addition to the outside, the way the esrog looks. Suddenly now we get introduced to a new thing. We have a shayla. Let's look at the simanim of an esrog also and see what it looks like. And since Calabria is built in Murkav, it has a chazaka, it's time that we'll discuss it, keep it as a chazaka that it is. And then he says that Rebbe wrote him again, that this Mr. Ziegelman, who initially started the whole balagan, also writes to the Rebbe certain fields that he knows for sure are not a problem, so go find those specific fields. The Rebbe actually writes to him the address of the field that Mr. Ziegelman claims. He says if there's one field, you're going to find a lot more fields also. Make sure to take someone who speaks Italian fluently, so that way you're not going to have any issues of the guy trying to spin your wheels, which is something anybody who's in the kashrus industry knows. And if you go into a place, a country where you don't speak the same language, they'll tell you yes, yes, yes to whatever you're asking. They don't understand what you're asking. He doesn't understand what you're answering, but yes is an international word, so everything is good. Don't rely on that. You find somebody who actually speaks the language. And it took a while, and they finally were able to do it, and they brought the Esrogim to Eretz Yisrael, and they planted they planted the Sregim Kfar right? So even though you lost the mile of, even though it's not similar to Calabria, but at least you don't have the Shaila of Harkova. And then because they already found the fields of the Bilti Murkov, so the people who were dealing with Calabria Sregim at the time started getting the Goyim to convert their fields into Bilti Murkov fields. And throughout the years it started developing that the Calabria fields more and more became not Murkov. More and more fields became not Murkov. Then it became that the Calabria became a tourist destination, so they wanted to destroy the Esrog trees, so a bunch of Satmar Yom Galite got and bought half of the fields, and they also make sure it's not Murkov. So the not Murkov part is not an issue really today. Right? And it has a Simonim, and it's growing in Italy, and it has a Chazakit, Mashmani Arit, it's all good. So that is pretty much the history of how we got to the Calabria Esrog. So now comes the Shaila. The guy wants to take this Esrog, which is the Eretz Yisrael Dika Esrog, which was planted in Calabria. It doesn't have those milas of Eretz Yisrael, of an Italian Esrog. So we said before, it has the milas of a Bilti Murkov, because it came from Eretz Yisrael. It might have the milas of Mashmani Aretz, that's growing right now in Italy. If it's a Calabria Esrog that took a detour through Eretz Yisrael and went back to Calabria, then it also has the milas of a Yichus. So L'chaira has everything. If you go back to the same sources before, if something that goes into the ground changes its metzias, right? So when the Italian Esrog went to Eretz Yisrael, it changed. It became Israeli Esrog. Now it's going back to Italy, so it still has something from Israel. That's the reason why you took it there. It's not because it's an Italian Esrog. So if you're going with Mashmani Aretz, and the reason for going with Mashmani Aretz is to have a bidur of Chalka Shalesav, etc., that's the reason why we take Italian Esrog. So what are you gaining by you're restarting the whole process of the bidur. You're not getting anywhere. So it could be that an Italian Esrog which came from Eretz Yisrael to Italy, an Italian Esrog which went from Italy to Eretz Yisrael back to Italy, has most of the milas, and maybe it's perfect. Could be that it's like a good idea to use those. But then it comes to a different problem, much bigger problem. In Hilchos Gittin, there is a concept, you write this name of the city the way it's written. I don't know if anybody here ever saw a get, whoever was in Vadair would see there's a certain way to spell the name Mונטריאול, a certain name to spell in every city. This was established many, many years ago. If a name of a city is spelled in a specific way, and then later the Yidden changed the way they pronounce the name of the city, or they're going to change the way they pronounce the city. So it could be they're going to say, hey, let's change the way the Gittin are written. Maybe because now they used to call it one way, and now they call it a little bit differently because everybody changed their accent, or because it got conquered. In Europe, there used to be cities that in certain regions that changed ownership based on the wars, so it could have been, it was called one way, it's called another way, and just moved around. Are you able to do it? There's chuvas all around. If you want to Lubavitcher Malka, the chuvas from the Rebbe Marash, based on the chuvas from the Alter Rebbe, that the whole shaila of the Hoitzi Laz and Ledishayin. If you go and you change something that was done previously, what you're creating is, you might be doing something better for you. But what you're doing is, you're creating that everybody's going to say that whatever happened until now was a problem. Because someone's going to be next generation, someone's going to look and is going to see there's a get written in Tafshin Pei, written one way, there's a get written in Tafresh Pei, written differently, and 100 years before differently. And to say Tafshin Pei, they probably got it right because they knew it. But before that, they didn't even know what they were doing. Which is awesome. So that's why we stick with the old ones. So let's say if somebody comes and he says that he wants to use specifically an esrog that came from Eretz Yisrael, from Italy to Eretz Yisrael, and back to Italy. Why is he doing this? He wants to tell you, I know there's issues in Calabria. I want to be more familiar. And I want to use an esrog that I know Eretz Yisrael doesn't have a Shiloh Bar Kova. Because we know it doesn't have a Shiloh Bar Kova. They never said, bring it to Eretz Yisrael. It's not going to have a Shiloh Bar Kova. But why am I not getting the regular Italian esrog? Because it probably does have a Shiloh Bar Kova. So what are you doing? You're creating a suffix on the rest of the 90% of the people are doing it. So even if maybe there is a reason to do it, and you do get all the milos, even for me it's still a suffix if you have the milos if it went through Eretz Yisrael and they got Eretz Yisrael the Kamilos, does it still lose all to Eretz Yisrael the Kamilos, and when it comes to Italy, is it still a problem or not? I'm not sure about if that remains or not, but you still, even if everything else works out, you're stuck with Moitzilas. Because unless everybody's going to be using those Esrogim, your Moitzilas, the majority of people are not going to be using these specific Esrogim. So L'chayra will be a problem because you're Moitzilas on everybody else. And besides for all the other fakes, maybe going through Italy, going through Eretz Yisrael, change the status. Anyway, so I'm not sure what the full answer to it is, but it's a question. And you're definitely Moitzilaz, and maybe you're not getting an Italian answer. I'm not sure. You're not getting Mishmani Oris. You're definitely not Murkav, that's for sure, but you're also getting a not Murkav in Italy. You're definitely being Moitzilaz, which is not a good thing. And you have a suffix if you're getting Mashmani Oris and the Yichus or not. So that's why I don't know if it's a good idea to get those Esrogim, at least for next year, because they're border. I want to conclude with an interesting thing from the Rebbe. The Rebbe spoke in Mitzvah Yom Kippurim Tashin Chavdalet by the Sudas. So there was a lot of people by the Sudas, and the Rebbe used to speak, it was more casual, so to speak. And Shmuel Levittin started a conversation about Calabria Esrogim, because the year before was a whole discussion in the Sudas about Calabria Esrogim that got replanted in Eretz Yisrael. So the next year, Shmuel Levittin started the conversation. So the Rebbe then tells him, my little bit Calabria Esrogim we all know. The Rebbe Rashab says Moshe Rabbeinu sent messengers to Italy to pick up an esrog when it says in the Kishbuch says to pick up an esrog. And then the Rebbe explains why. What's the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu had to send people all the way to Italy to pick up an esrog? Because the Chayra, there was probably closer esrogim to Har Sinai. So why do you have to go all the way there? So the Rebbe says, obviously the reason is the Mishmani Oretz Yemeshavecha, which is the Talia Shel Yava. The Rebbe says, when you fulfill a mitzvah, it has to be done in the best possible way, in a natural way, and Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to get the best possible, the best possible way, in a non-miracle way, without any moifsim. So he had to send people, didn't send malachim, didn't come with, he had to send people to Italy to go pick up an esrog for him, so he should be able to do the mitzvah the best possible way. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to get an esrog from Italy, so could you.
Very good. Ashkoyach Shalom Ber. We should be all saying that this year we will have the esrogim from whatever Moshiach will come and remember all the inyonim. Tomorrow, the kינוס will be, I'm sure the kינוס will be tomorrow, the days after, and good morning.